The first thing I saw when I came home that Tuesday was the mud. Brown water flooding across my backyard, pooling in the low spots near the fence, turning the grass into a swamp. It was April 23rd, 2021, 4:30 in the afternoon, and the sun was still bright enough to make the water shimmer. For a moment, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw the pond, or what was left of it. The custom liner I'd installed 12 years ago was torn open, a ragged gash running nearly 4 feet across the eastern edge. The water level had dropped by 2/3, and floating on the surface, belly up in the murky remaining water, were my fish. Not all of them. Not yet, but I could see Margaret, the oldest one, her white and orange scales catching the light, and Thomas, the little butterfly koi with the flowing fins, and Sophie. Sophie was the one that broke me. I actually ran across the yard, my work shoes squelching in the mud, and dropped to my knees at the pond's edge. The water was cold when I plunged my hands in, frantically trying to scoop up the fish that were still moving, still alive, their gills pumping desperately in the shallow, contaminated water. There were 5 still swimming, darting in panicked circles. I didn't have a backup tank, didn't have anything prepared. I grabbed the large plastic storage bin from my garage, filled it with the garden hose, and started transferring them as carefully as my shaking hands would allow. By the time I got the 5th one into the bin, 2 more had stopped moving in the pond. 15 koi. I'd had 15 koi. 12 years of care, of feeding them every morning and evening, of monitoring the water quality, of sitting on the stone bench I'd built and watching them glide through the water like living brushstrokes. 12 years of naming them, remembering through them, and now 10 were dead. I was still kneeling there in the mud, staring at the bodies floating in what remained of my pond, when I heard the voice behind me. Jesus, Mark, I'm so sorry, man. I had no idea the excavator would go through the liner like that. I turned around slowly. Kevin Chen, my neighbor of 8 years, was standing at the fence line between our properties. He was holding a beer, still in his work clothes, khakis and a polo shirt with his real estate company logo. Behind him, parked in his driveway, was a small excavator, the kind you can rent from Home Depot. His yard was torn up, trenches running along the property line, piles of dirt everywhere. What did you do? My voice came out flat, distant. Kevin had the decency to look uncomfortable. I'm putting in a French drain. The water's been pooling on my side after it rains, and my basement flooded last month. I needed to redirect the runoff, but the guy at the rental place said the excavator was safe near property lines, that it wouldn't. He gestured helplessly at my pond. I didn't know it would break through like that. It must have hit a rock or something, sent a piece flying. I don't know. I swear I wasn't even that close to your side. I stood up. My knees were caked in mud. My hands were shaking. You killed my fish. I know. I'm sorry. Look, I'll pay for the liner repair, okay? And I'll replace the fish. How much are koi? Like $50 each. I'll cover it. $50 each. I felt something crack inside my chest, but I didn't have the words yet. Didn't have the ability to explain what he'd actually destroyed. So I just said, "Get off my property." Kevin's face hardened. "I'm not on your property. I'm on my side of the fence, and I already apologized. It was an accident. Get away from my fence." He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. "Whatever, man. Let me know about the liner." He walked back toward his house, and I heard his sliding door shut with a decisive thump. I spent the next 3 hours trying to save what I could. I set up an emergency filtration system for the 5 survivors, treated the water, monitored their breathing. By midnight, 2 more had died. By morning, another one. That left 2, Hikari and James, the 2 smallest, somehow the strongest. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, looking out at the ruined pond, and I thought about names. Margaret had been my grandmother. The first koi I'd bought, a big kohaku with a pattern like spilled paint. My grandmother had died 3 months before I'd started building the pond, and I'd been lost in a way I didn't know how to articulate. The pond had been something to do with my hands, with my grief. And when the fish arrived, when I'd seen that first big one with her bold markings, I thought of my grandmother's boldness, her refusal to fade quietly. So I'd named her Margaret. Thomas had been my college roommate. Dead at 26 from a motorcycle accident, a kid who'd been so full of life it seemed impossible he could just stop existing. The butterfly koi had reminded me of him, always in motion, always graceful. Sophie. Sophie had been my daughter, the one who never took a breath. Stillborn at 37 weeks, perfect and silent, her tiny fingers curled against her palm. My ex-wife and I had named her Sophie in the hospital, had held her for 2 hours, and then we'd never spoken her name again. The marriage didn't survive. The grief was too big, too different for each of us. But I'd gotten a koi, a small white one with a single orange spot on her head, and I'd named her Sophie, and every day when I fed her, I'd say her name out loud. Kevin didn't know any of this. To him, they were just fish. Expensive goldfish in a backyard pond. An unfortunate accident, worth maybe a few $100s in replacement costs. But they weren't just fish. They were a living memorial. They were the way I remembered. The way I kept the people I'd lost close to me, swimming through my days, their names on my lips every morning and evening. And now they were gone. I called in sick to work on Wednesday, spent the day researching. I learned that in small claims court, you could sue for property damage up to $5,000 in my state. I learned that koi value was determined by size, coloring, lineage, and age. I had purchase receipts for most of them, though some had been gifts. I had photographs documenting their growth over the years. I had water quality logs, vet records from when Hikari had been sick with a parasite infection. I had everything I needed to prove what they were worth, financially at least. On Thursday, I went to Kevin's door. He answered in gym shorts and a t-shirt, looking annoyed before I even spoke. "I need you to pay for the damage," I said. "The pond liner, the filtration system that was destroyed, and the fish. I'm calculating $4,700 total." Kevin laughed. Actually laughed. "You're insane. I already told you I'd pay for the liner, but $4,000 for some fish? No way." They weren't some fish. They were mature koi. 12 years old, some of them. Do you have any idea what that means in terms of value? I know that you're trying to rip me off. Look, Mark, I'm sorry about your hobby or whatever, but this is getting ridiculous. It was an accident. I'll give you $300 for your trouble, and that's generous. Then I'll see you in court. His smile disappeared. Are you seriously threatening to sue me over fish? I'm not threatening. I'm informing you. You'll get the paperwork in a few weeks. I turned and walked back to my house, and I heard him yell something behind me, but I didn't stop. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't grief. It was rage. Pure, clean rage. I filed the small claims lawsuit on Friday. The filing fee was $75. I itemized everything. $800 for the liner and repair, $400 for the damaged filtration system, and $3,500 for the koi. I attached photographs, receipts, expert valuations from a local koi dealer who'd assessed the photos and given me written estimates. I attached a timeline of the incident. I was meticulous, thorough, because this wasn't about the money, not really. This was about being heard, about making Kevin understand that he'd destroyed something that mattered, that couldn't be dismissed with a few $100 and a shrug. The court date was set for July 9th, 2.5 months away. In that time, Kevin and I didn't speak. We'd see each other sometimes, getting mail or taking out trash, and we'd pretend the other didn't exist. His French drain was completed, a neat line of river rock running along the property line. My pond sat empty, the torn liner a gaping wound. I couldn't bring myself to fix it yet, couldn't bear to fill it with water and new fish like the others had never existed. Hikari and James lived in that plastic bin in my garage for 3 weeks before I finally set up a proper indoor tank. 80 gallons, the biggest I could fit. It wasn't the same. They swam in listless circles, and I wondered if fish could grieve, if they missed the others, the space, the sky above them. My sister Rachel called in late May. "Mom told me about the lawsuit," she said. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "You're suing your neighbor for $5,000 over fish. That doesn't sound fine." $4,700, and they weren't just fish. There was a pause. "I know they weren't. I know what they meant to you. But Mark, is this really about the koi, or is this about something else?" "What else would it be about?" "Control, grief, anger. Pick one. You've been living alone in that house for 6 years. You barely talk to anyone. Those fish were your whole social life, and now they're gone, and you're looking for someone to blame. He destroyed my property. That's not complicated." "It's not about property. It's about Sophie." I hung up on her, Didn't call back for 3 weeks. When I finally did, I didn't apologize, and neither did she. We just talked about other things. But her words stayed with me, needling at the edges of my certainty. The court hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Small claims courtroom, judge's chambers, no jury. I arrived at 1:30 with a folder containing every piece of documentation I'd assembled. Kevin showed up at 1:55, accompanied by a woman I didn't recognize, a lawyer friend I assumed, though lawyers weren't technically required in small claims. He looked confident, almost smug. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Patricia Holbrook, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She reviewed our filings, asked us both to present our cases, and listened without much expression. I went first. I explained the pond, the 12 years of care, the value of mature koi. I showed photographs of the fish, receipts, the expert valuations. I explained the damage to the liner and filtration system. I kept my voice steady, factual. I didn't mention names. Kevin's turn was shorter. He admitted to the excavator incident, but maintained it was an accident, that he'd been working on his own property, that the damage to my pond was unforeseeable. He offered again to pay for the liner repair, $600, he said, which was more than fair. But the fish were a different story. Your Honor, we're talking about goldfish. Fancy goldfish, sure, but the plaintiff is asking for $3,500 for fish he probably paid a few hundred for. That's not reasonable. That's opportunistic. Judge Holbrook looked at me. Mr. Sawyer, do you have proof of the fish's value? I handed over the expert's written valuation. She read it carefully, made a note. Then she asked, were these fish purely decorative, or did they serve another purpose for you? And there it was, the question I'd been avoiding. I could have just said decorative. Could have kept it simple, financial. But something in her tone, the way she'd asked about purpose, made me realize she was giving me an opening, a chance to explain. They were named, I said quietly. Each one was named after someone I'd lost. The room went very still. Judge Holbrook leaned forward slightly. Can you elaborate? So I did. I told her about Margaret, my grandmother, who'd raised me after my parents divorced and had taught me about resilience and stubbornness. About Thomas, the college roommate who died too young, who'd never gotten to see the life he should have had. About Sophie. I told her about Sophie. My voice broke when I said her name. I hadn't said it out loud to anyone in years. My ex-wife and I had an unspoken agreement never to mention her, as if speaking about her would crack us both open. But here, in this sterile courtroom, with Kevin sitting 15 feet away looking increasingly uncomfortable, I said it. Sophie was my daughter. She was stillborn, and I named a koi after her because I needed somewhere to put that grief. I needed to say her name every day, to remember that she existed, that she was real, even if she never got to live. I looked at Kevin. He was staring at the table, jaw tight. So when you destroyed my pond, I continued, you didn't just kill some expensive goldfish. You destroyed the only memorial I had, the only place where all those people I loved were still alive, still with me. And I know that sounds crazy. I know it's just fish. But to me, they were everything. The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour. Finally, Judge Holbrook took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Mr. Chen, she said, do you have anything to add? Kevin cleared his throat. I had no idea. I'm sorry. I wouldn't have. If I'd known. He trailed off, then tried again. I still maintain it was an accident, but I understand now that the loss was more significant than I realized. Judge Holbrook nodded slowly. She made some notes, then looked up at both of us. Here's my ruling, she said. Mr. Chen, you are liable for the property damage caused by your excavation work. I'm ordering you to pay Mr. Sawyer $1,200, $800 for the liner repair, and $400 for the filtration system. As for the koi, while I recognize their sentimental value was immense, I have to base my judgment on fair market value. Based on the expert valuation provided, I'm awarding an additional $1,800 for the loss of the fish. Total judgment, $3,000, not the $4,700 I'd asked for, but more than Kevin had wanted to pay. A split decision. However, Judge Holbrook continued, I want to say something off the record. She looked at me. Mr. Sawyer, I understand what you lost. I truly do. But I'd encourage you to consider whether this lawsuit is giving you what you actually need. Money won't bring back the fish. It won't bring back the people they represented. And keeping your pond empty, keeping that wound open, that's not healing. That's punishment. Whether you're punishing yourself or your neighbor, I'm not sure. But either way, it's not helping you move forward. She looked at Kevin. And Mr. Chen, before you start any project near a property line again, talk to your neighbors. An hour of conversation could have prevented all of this. Court was adjourned. Kevin wrote me a check right there in the hallway outside the courtroom. $3,000. His hand was shaking slightly as he signed it. I really am sorry, he said. About your daughter. About all of it. I took the check, folded it, put it in my pocket. Yeah. We walked out to the parking lot together, not speaking. At my car, I stopped and turned to him. I need to ask you something. Kevin paused, wary. When you were digging, before you hit the liner, did you know how close you were to my pond? He hesitated, then nodded. I knew. I thought I had enough clearance. I was trying to save money by not hiring a professional, and I misjudged. That's the truth. Okay. Okay? I unlocked my car. That's all I needed to know, that it wasn't on purpose. He let out a long breath. It wasn't. I swear. I drove home with the check in my pocket and Judge Holbrook's words in my head. Punishment. Was that what this was? I'd spent 2.5 months building a legal case, documenting every detail, preparing for this moment. And now that it was over, now that I'd won, sort of, I felt hollow, empty. The rage that had sustained me was gone, and in its place was just exhaustion. Rachel called that evening. How'd it go? I got 3,000. That's something. Yeah. You don't sound happy. I looked out my kitchen window, at the empty pond, at the torn liner glinting in the fading light. The judge said I was punishing myself, keeping it empty. Were you? Maybe. I don't know. I couldn't stand the idea of pretending they never existed, of filling it back up like nothing happened. You don't have to pretend they never existed, Rachel said gently, but you can't live in a memorial forever. That's not living. That's just haunting yourself. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. Thought about Sophie, about the 2 hours I'd held her in the hospital, about how my ex-wife had wanted to bury her in a cemetery, have a place to visit, but I'd insisted on cremation. I'd been so certain I didn't want a grave, didn't want a fixed location where grief would trap me. But I'd just created a different kind of grave, hadn't I? A liquid one, a place where I could feed my sorrow every morning and evening, keep it alive and swimming. The next morning, I called a pond restoration company. They came out that afternoon, assessed the damage, and gave me a quote. $1,500 to repair the liner, upgrade the filtration, replant the water lilies and lotus. I wrote them a check, half of what Kevin had paid me. It took 2 weeks to complete. When they finished, the pond looked better than it had in years. Clean water, healthy plants, everything balanced and ready. The foreman asked if I wanted them to source some koi for me, but I said no, not yet. Hikari and James went into the pond on a Saturday morning in late July. I released them carefully, watched them swim cautious circles, exploring this new old space. They seemed happy, relieved. They had room again. I didn't get more koi right away. For 3 months, it was just the two of them, and I'd sit on my bench every evening and watch them swim. I still fed them morning and evening, still said their names. Hikari meant light in Japanese, and James had been my grandfather's name. But I didn't name them after people I'd lost. They were just themselves. Kevin and I started talking again in September. Nothing deep, just neighbor small talk over the fence. He'd gotten his basement waterproofed after the French drain. I mentioned I was thinking about getting a few more koi. He asked if he could see the pond sometime, and I said sure. We had a beer on my patio one afternoon, and he told me about his sister, who died when he was a kid. Car accident. He said he'd never known what to do with that grief, where to put it, so he'd just buried it and tried not to think about it. I think that's why I was such a jerk about the fish, he admitted. I didn't understand it because I'd never let myself understand my own stuff. Yeah, I said. I get that. I got 3 more koi in October. Not to replace the ones I'd lost. No one could replace them. But to move forward, to let the pond be a place of life again, not just a memorial. I named them after things I wanted to remember: hope, patience, and grace. Not people, aspirations. The lawsuit had cost me $75 to file, hours of stress, and a ruined relationship with my neighbor. I'd won $3,000 and lost 10 fish and gained a different kind of clarity. Judge Holbrook had been right. I'd been punishing myself, keeping that wound open, because as long as the pond was empty, as long as I was fighting Kevin, I had somewhere to direct all the grief I didn't know how to process. But grief isn't supposed to be directed. It's supposed to be felt, moved through, integrated. You can't sue your way out of it. You can't win a judgment against death. I still think about Sophie every day, but I don't need a fish to say her name anymore. I say it when I want to, out loud, to Rachel, to the therapist I finally started seeing in November. I say it when I'm angry or sad or when something beautiful happens and I wish she could have seen it. I say it because she was real and I was her father, and that doesn't need a symbol. It just needs me to remember, to speak. The pond is full now. 5 koi swimming through the clean water, their colors bright in the morning sun. Sometimes Kevin comes over and we sit on the bench together, not talking much, just watching them move. There's something peaceful about it, something that feels like forgiveness, though I'm not sure if I'm forgiving him or myself. Last week, a bird knocked itself against my sliding door and fell onto the patio, stunned but alive. I picked it up carefully, held it in my palms until it came to, and then watched it fly away. And I thought about how fragile everything is, how quickly things can be destroyed, how much effort it takes to build something, a pond, a memorial, a life, and how little it takes to break it, but also how much resilience there is, how Hikari and James survived when 10 others didn't, how a torn liner can be repaired, how neighbors who stop speaking can start again, how grief can loosen its grip if you stop clenching so hard around it. I didn't sue Kevin for $4,700 because I wanted the money. I sued him because I needed someone to admit that what I'd lost mattered, that it was real. That you can't just dismiss someone's pain with a shrug and $300. And in the end, I got that acknowledgement. Not in the way I expected, not in the amount I'd asked for, but in a courtroom where I finally said my daughter's name out loud and a judge listened. Where Kevin heard, really heard, what his accident had cost. Sometimes justice isn't about winning, it's about being seen. And now, when I sit by my pond in the evening and watch the koi swim through the darkening water, I'm not just remembering the people I've lost. I'm remembering that I'm still here, still breathing, still capable of building something beautiful, even after it's been destroyed. Still learning that letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It just means unclenching your fist and opening your palm and seeing what remains. What remains is this: a repaired pond, 5 koi, a neighbor who became an enemy who became a neighbor again, a daughter's name spoken aloud, $3,000 in the bank that I'll probably never spend because it's not really money, it's proof. Proof that I fought for something. Proof that I mattered enough to fight, and maybe that's enough. If you've ever fought for something that seemed small to everyone else but meant everything to you, I'd love to hear about it. Sometimes the battles that look petty from the outside are the ones that change us most. Drop a comment if this resonated, and if you'd like more stories about the messy, complicated ways we deal with loss and repair, I'd appreciate a like or subscribe. Thank you for reading. Thank you for understanding that sometimes it's not about the money, it's about being heard.